All right, my friends, I'll tell you what, without further ado, I think we're going to launch in here and get started so we give our guests plenty of time. Again, my name is Jeff. I'm going to be your host. We're going to be together over the next 55 plus minutes, and I want you to settle in and get ready for a brilliant conversation. Now, our guest today has worked in personal development and transformation for over a decade. He has led seminars through the U.S., personally coached hundreds of people, and created a framework for singles to consciously create a lifelong committed partnership with their ideal partner. Now, I don't know about you, friends, but he's got my interest already. I'm interested in hearing this framework. He is the co-founder of The Living Relationship, author of Our Life Together, a couples journal, and creator and host of the Conscious Love Show podcast. He currently lives with his wife, Fatima. I hope I said that right. You're going to correct me if I haven't, Shane. And his puppy, Ollie, just outside of Philadelphia. And he spends his free time chasing the most beautiful views he can find on the earth. Circles, would you do me a favor and give our guest a warm round of love? Shane Kohler. Shane, welcome to Circles Masterclass.
Thanks so much. Really grateful to be here. I'm very excited to be joining the app and get to know all the people here. And yeah, just real pleasure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I know I can talk about you from what I read on paper, but I would love for you to just take a little bit of time here to unpack your story, kind of what your journey looks like, and then what led you into this transformational work with couples that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much. I'm happy to. So my journey, my journey's been an interesting one for sure. But, I suppose it starts with just me always kind of loving love, I guess. As long as I can remember, I think it's, of all the different domains of life, I think love has always been the most exciting for me and the most interesting. And, when I was younger, I suppose it was just about the way it felt and the excitement of being attracted to someone and, all of that. But as I grew and started to understand more, I became really fascinated with, the psychological components behind it. I became really fascinated with, this really interesting predicament that most human beings are in where, we all seem to desperately want love. And at the same time, we seem to fight really hard to keep it out of our lives in a lot of ways. So the more I started to realize that, the more, I guess, fascinated I became. But, I think my journey has been one of very much struggling in love. When I was younger, struggling a lot with, am I even lovable? Am I even the kind of person that somebody would want to be with? I think kind of my whole life when I was younger, I'm just talking about like in grade school and middle school and things like that. I always wanted like to have a girlfriend, and I tried really, really hard, and I wasn't necessarily the most likely to succeed in that area. Let's put it that way. And I tried really, really hard, and it didn't really work out for me. I had a couple girlfriends here and there, and it never really went anywhere. And then when I was in high school, when I was about 16 years old, I had my first, I'd say, real relationship with, someone who actually liked me back and was actually going somewhere. And we were together for about 8 months, and she ended up cheating on me and just completely breaking my heart. And that was a devastating experience for me at 16 years old. It probably, honestly, if I'm honest, probably took me about a decade to really get over that. And moving forward from there, I didn't really have another relationship that I would say was successful, right? Like moving forward from there, I had a lot of nightmare relationships. And so, my journey has been one of being in love with love, being fascinated by love, thinking love was the most amazing thing in the world. And at the same time, it seeming very impossible and very tragic and very hurtful. I would say I always kind of had hope, and I don't know if it was just me being naive or what it was, but I feel like I always had hope, and I would always try again and try again and try again and try again. And I had this kind of, I'd call it maybe a dumb optimism in a way, but it kept me from being jaded. So that was good. But I'd say I did have this kind of optimism, and on a level, I believed that I would always find it. And no matter what I went through, I mean, in my 20s, I had some pretty tragic relationships. I was involved with a woman who I do believe is a narcissist. And I do my best not to throw that word around too much, because I think it does get thrown around too much. But I do think she was actually the real deal. And that was an incredibly toxic relationship. I was in a relationship with a married woman for a period of time. That was an absolute nightmare. I've been through my share of being breadcrumbed and being led on and being friend zoned. And I mean, all the stuff. I feel like I've been through most of it or all of it. And, but I guess when I was in my late 20s, I met a woman who's now my wife. And, there was this interesting experience that we both felt when we found each other. And it was like, oh, well, this is how it's supposed to be. Right. And I mean that in the way that we related with each other. So there was me, being honest that I like you, I'm into this, like, I want to explore this. And she actually reciprocated that openly and honestly. Like, I'm into this too. I want to know what happens. Like, let's see where it goes, And we were long distance. We lived 3 hours on a plane ride apart. So I was traveling from South Florida to New Jersey to be with her, and she was doing the opposite to be with me. And so that was, the first 3 years of our relationship was that navigating long distance. And I think our relationship, I mean, obviously she's my wife, obviously it had a very profound impact on me, but I think something that I really realized when I met my wife, and it wasn't easy. I mean, we almost broke up about 100 times in the first couple of years, but we worked through it and we stuck it out, and, ultimately got to a place where we were ready to get married, and we were ready to have, to have the real thing with each other. And I think what I started to do at that point was I started to reflect on how I got there. And, all the years that I, thought it would never happen, or all the years that I was lonely, or all the years it felt impossible. And I just started to reflect back on that. And it's important to note here as well that in the midst of all of this, I was involved in personal development work. And I think it's important to not leave that part out, because I don't think it would have happened this way had I not been doing that work. But I was working with some different coaches, and I was involved with a training company that had helped me grow tremendously. And so, when a couple years into my relationship with my wife, I started to kind of reflect back on, everything that had happened and how we got to where we were, and all the work that I did on myself before meeting her. And, all the work I did going through, all the different kinds of toxic situations I was in. And I started to realize, like, this, like, none of this was an accident, that this was actually, that this relationship I had found myself in was a reflection of the tremendous growth that I had gone through as an individual over the years. It was a reflection of me learning how to deal with things like rejection, learning how to develop my own confidence, my own sense of worthiness. It was like all these things I had been working on over the years kind of culminated in the manifestation of this amazing partnership that we have today. And, being that I was somebody who had struggled with love my entire life, while also being maybe borderline obsessed with it, which is a unique combination, I think. But, the combination of those things had me really realize, like, wow, there is actually a path there, right? If somebody wants to find love, like, there are actually things you can do. And, what I think most people are doing, and I say this because at this point I've worked with thousands of people in their love lives. And what I realized that most people are doing is they're doing a lot to try to find love, but they're doing the same things that don't work, and they're doing them over and over and over and over again and getting the same results. And I was fortunate enough, I guess. I don't necessarily take personal responsibility for this, but I think it was largely influenced by the community I was in, the coaches I had access to, the really positive and uplifting influences that were in my life. But I was fortunate enough to not make those mistakes. And so my trajectory was a little bit different in that I experienced all the same things. I went through all the same things, and I honestly chalk it up to great coaching and great guidance that I didn't continue to make the same mistakes over and over again. So as I was making these mistakes, I was learning from them. I was integrating them. I was healing my wounds. I was healing my trauma. I was healing my fears, my insecurity. I was developing confidence. I was developing a sense of worthiness. I was learning how to talk to people and, ask for what I want and create boundaries, like, all these kinds of things. So I think I was just very fortunate in that I had such great influences around me that I was able to really learn and integrate these lessons. And as I started coaching and I started working with other people, I found that other people could actually do the exact same thing. I remember I had a client to this day, one of my favorite clients I've ever had, but her name is Kay. And she was one of my first coaching clients many years ago. And, when she came to me, she was actively in a relationship with a man who was married and was lying to her about it. And as I got to know Kay, I realized that this was not new for her. This was actually the third time she had been in a relationship like this. And so, kind of a good example of continuing to recreate the same thing over and over and over again. And so shortly after she started coaching with me, she realized what was going on with him. She ended the relationship. She moved on. And that's when Kay and I kind of started her healing journey. And, I taught her very much to do the same things that we're talking about now. And today, Kay, she moved to Paris to be with her now husband. They live in Paris together. They're currently awaiting their second baby, and they just have the most beautiful life. And so that was, I think, Kay specifically was a huge lesson for me to go, wow, like, literally people can just learn these lessons, integrate them, and it will work, right? And this was someone who had attracted married men into her life 3 times in a row. And then she starts doing this work, and all of a sudden she creates something completely different than that. And so I've been able to kind of recreate this over and over and over again with, lots and lots of clients from all over the world. And I've just found that, it's, one, it works, right? Like there is a way to attract healthy, authentic love into your life. There are practical, realistic steps that we can take to get there. And so the more I've clarified this process and the more confidence I've developed in this process, the more I felt inclined that I need to share it with the world. And so that's what I do. And I guess that's my story in a nutshell. Did I answer your question, Jeff?
You answered like 1,000 of them, Shane. So yes, indeed. I love it. But I'm so thankful. Anybody else in the house getting anything out of the conversation already? Can you just hear his passion in what he is sharing with us today? I love authenticity. It comes out with all of its heart. As we say, we wear it on our sleeve, and it's very evident, the work that you're doing, Shane. I appreciate it. You said a couple of things in that I'd like to unpack a little bit. One of them that I caught was that you begin to see that the types of people, the types of relationships that you personally were attracting were in direct proportion to your own personal growth. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. I wondered if you could unpack that a little bit, because here's what I kind of wanted to flip the script on us just a tad bit to say that would mean, now this would be a kind of a very difficult reality, but it's one worth exploring. That would mean that if the relationship that I have in my life or keep having in my life, I don't have to go out there to find anything new or different. I probably ought to see what's in me that needs to maybe change and grow and develop. Yes?
I agree with that statement 100%.
Yeah. Now, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your personal journey. When you got to this place where you thought, okay, Shane, it's you. What did you work on? Do you mind sharing? What were some of those key transformational points in your own life, Shane?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, there's a lot of conversation in the dating world or in manifestation circles or, wherever you go, where people are talking about attracting the right person. Right. And I think there is definitely some truth in that where, your energetic vibration will call out to people and they will respond to it. So there is definitely some truth in that you attract people. But I think what's even more easier to look at than who you attract is who you are attracted to. And so if I share, I shared earlier that I was in a relationship with someone who I believe to be a narcissist. And I don't say that to say anything negative about her. She was a human being who had been through a lot of traumatic stuff in her life, and she had dealt with it the way she dealt with it. And who am I to judge that? Right. But so the question is not to say like there's something wrong with her, but the fact is that we had a really toxic relationship. Like that's just a fact. We had a very toxic relationship, and largely I was definitely a participant in it. I allowed it. I encouraged it. I enabled it. And I had my own toxic stuff too. But largely the reason our relationship was so destructive because she was incapable of having a healthy relationship. I definitely had some things to learn. I had some growth to do. But I think I was capable, whereas she was not really capable. And, but the biggest question is not, oh, well, how did she come into my life and ruin it? Right. The bigger question is, how did I allow her into my life to do all of that? And so if we really put that under a microscope, like of all the women in the world, of all the people I could have potentially tried to have a relationship with, why was she the one I was trying with? Right. And the answer to that question, if I'm honest, is like, because if I put it as simply as possible, it's that she liked me, or I thought she liked me, or at least she was available for me. And I didn't think anybody else was. And so that is a reflection of my own identity, right? It actually is not true. Like I've come to realize there are lots of women in the world who would be open to having a relationship with me. But at the time, the current box I was living in, the current identity I was living in, the way in which I understood myself was I thought she was my only option. And so for anyone who's living in a kind of level of worthiness that feels that way, for anyone who has an identity that is, like that, there's going to be a degree of scarcity in your mindset. And there's going to be a feeling of desperation. And so what's going to happen is you're not going to go out in the world looking for, who do I want to be with? Like, I'll just contrast that with when I met my wife. I wasn't coming from this place of maybe I could get her to like me. I was coming from in my greatest imagination of the kind of person I could be with. This is the kind of person I would like to be with. And so I'm going to pursue her for that reason. Very different than, when I met this other woman and I thought I had a chance with her. And I was like, I'm going to cling on to this chance with everything I have because I don't get chances very often. So I think that's a really great example of, what you mean when you say like relationships are really a reflection of ourselves. Like if we talk about possibility, anything is possible, right? Like it is possible for you to go out there and find the person that, really would fulfill your wildest dreams and have a relationship happen with them. And the fact is that most people don't believe that's possible. Most people don't believe that that's a reality for them. Most people are living in a scarcity mentality. They're living in a desperation mentality. They're living in have been traumatized by past relationships. And so my past relationships, if I, just to draw a parallel here, I shared about being 16 years old and having my, the first person I was ever in love with, right, cheat on me and then break up with me. And I didn't really recover from that for many years. And so when I'm looking at the dating pool, I'm looking at it as the guy who was so unworthy that I gave everything to this girl and she dumped me and cheated on me with this guy who, in my opinion, was way less of a partner than I was. So I'm looking at it going like, if she would choose him over me, that must mean I suck. Right. And so like, this is kind of the identity I had developed. And I want to say too, it wasn't my fault that I developed this identity. It was just kind of what happened as a result of my life experience. But, when I'm trying to find a relationship, this is what I'm operating from. And so in all of that, it's like absolutely who you believe you are, what you believe you're worth, what you believe is possible for you is going to be reflected in all of your relationships. And we're talking about romantic relationships here, and that's definitely true. It's also going to be reflected in your friendships. It's also going to be reflected in the work environment that you have. It's going to be reflected in every area of your life, because our lives are literally showing up as a reflection to who we believe we are. And we are unconsciously seeking out the people, places, and experiences in life that reflect who we believe we are.
Yeah. So powerfully said. Friends, if you're just joining us, my name is Jeff Kroom. I'm your host here on Circles Masterclass, and we're talking to Shane Kohler about discovering, empowering love. Shane's been working with people in the transformation space of relationships for over a decade. He's sharing some great truths with us today. Shane, you just continue to make me think about how I am reflecting myself to the world. Now, I know probably our guest today could relate to maybe not getting a great start in life, not getting a fair shake in life, and then maybe even taking on some of those relationships and friendships, so to speak, that we knew that we should have never gotten into. But there's this almost this insatiable desire to love or want to be loved that almost makes us look for love in all the wrong places. Yes?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, the other thing you talked about is worthiness. Friends, anybody in the house here today understand what we're talking about when we talk about feeling worthy? You talk about the dating. Now, I've been connected with my wife for over 30 years, so I haven't been in the dating scene for a while, Shane. But I do remember it was that playing hard to get, right? It wasn't like going all in all at once. You had to let them know that you were worth chasing. Come on, somebody, right? you had enough. You were all that add a bag of chips that first pass. You just let it pass because you wanted them to know that you were worth going after. And I know relationships that have started like that, but then later on in the relationship, we kind of lose that, don't we, Shane? We kind of lose that chasing each other, feeling valuable, feeling like we have to put our best foot forward. And we can even get in this mundane routine in the relationship. Have you helped anybody that's kind of burnt out their love in their relationship and help them rekindle that a little bit? I don't know why that came into my heart, but I just thought I'd pop it out there for you, see where you could help us in that area.
Yeah. Well, I certainly have coached a handful of couples in that domain, and it's not what I do primarily. So most of my work is working with singles. But to shed a little bit of light on that, and largely it's going to come from what I've learned in my own relationship with my wife. But I think it's to kind of rekindle that, or to find that with each other again. It does require us to create space for it. And at least what I've noticed in my relationship with my wife is that it's very easy to get busy. it's very easy to get overwhelmed. And, I think when you're overwhelmed, the last thing you feel is sexy. So, it does require,
So true.
requires creating space for that. Right. And I think, that can be achieved by setting aside date nights, getting a babysitter, all the kind of normal stuff, creating space for it. But then I think also there has to be a desire for it, right? Like you have to want that. And I think something that so many people fall into is that when the relationship starts to not feel the way they thought it was supposed to feel, rather than recognizing like, okay, it's up to me, or it's up to us to create that feeling, they start to assume that, oh, it's not as good as I thought it was, or maybe I'm with the wrong person, or maybe I made the wrong decision. And so they start to, rather than kind of doubling down and putting their energy into the relationship, they start to look outside of the relationship. And they start to, even if they're not actively pursuing someone outside of the relationship, they're looking around going, well, what would it be like if I was with them? Or I look at my friend's relationship and the kind of relationship they have, and then I compare my relationship to that, and I wonder why we don't have that kind of relationship. And so I think those are the kinds of habits that cause it to fall apart. I've always said this. I've said that being in a committed relationship is kind of like a meditation. And, if anybody who's learned how to meditate, one of the things they teach you is that you kind of have to choose a point of focus and keep your focus on that point. And I think being in a committed relationship is a lot like that. And there's so much distraction, and there's so much stuff telling you it needs to be like this, and it needs to be like that. And if you're not having this, then you're wrong. And, there's all this stuff. And it's really about like keeping your focus on the relationship and wanting it to succeed, and being so willing to have it succeed that you show up every day and put your heart into it. And I think so many of us, there's this kind of unconscious expectation that when we find the right person, it's just going to be rainbows and butterflies, and we're just going to ride off into the sunset together. And it's like, yeah, it's going to be that way for about 3 months, and then you're going to have to start working on it. Right. And so many people, when they have to start working on it, rather than really putting their whole heart in it, they start to go, oh, this wasn't what I thought it was. I made the wrong choice. And then they start looking outside of the relationship, like I said earlier.
Yeah, profound. Anybody concur with that statement, friends? Anybody in the house here today looking for love? I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have asked that, but I think it's an appropriate question. Our relationship topic. Anybody looking for love? We need a new relationship. We're looking for that ideal person to spend the rest of our lives with. I'm going to get to that in half a second, because I'd really love for you to begin to break apart what an ideal partner would look like for us, Shane. But before you get there, it made me think about actually choosing love. I mean, that's a huge proponent, right? You had said something about, after the first 3 months or first 3 days, or however you want to call it, things change. One of the things that my wife and I, again, we've known each other for 31 years. We've been married for 28 years. So we've been together sharing same space, kids, life, etc., for a good portion of our lives. And so the thing that we always talk about, Shane, is that we didn't understand how much personal transformation each of us would go through individually. Mm-hmm. Right? The more we age, the more we go through life, the more we experience. Our bodies change, our minds change, our moods change. And we never, you don't sit around the first date table going, okay, in 30 years from now, my friend, come on, somebody, right? But those are those moments in life where we have to choose. We choose to find that love. We choose to fill each other's tank, so to speak, so that we keep it fostering. And then I'm sure you've experienced this. Our definition of love changes over a period of time, right? How we define love kind of changes as we grow together. Yeah. Well said. I wonder if you could take us on this journey now about an ideal partner. What do you encourage people to look for? What qualities, characteristic traits do you encourage your clients to look for when it comes to an ideal partner, Shane?
Yeah, well, and to your point, Jeff, like so many things are going to change, right? And so there is a matter of of finding someone who is ideal right now, and also understanding that they are going to change. And I think what it comes down to is like, if having a really strong, healthy relationship is a really great thing to have. I know that I'm being Captain Obvious right now, but it's like, it is like a really great thing to have. And it's also a very rare thing to have in this world. I think that, like, if you look at all the people who have been married for, many, many years, and you look at how many of them are actually happy and in love with their partner, like I'd venture to say a lot of them are not, and so to have this is, it's a beautiful thing. It's an amazing thing. And it's also a rare thing. And the reason it's so rare is because I think we want it to be easier than it is. We want the work to kind of be done for us, and we just get to enjoy it rather than actually having to put in the work for it. And so, to go back to your question, like, what do I encourage people to look for in an ideal partner? I mean, I think it really comes down to values. And my wife and I had some pretty heavy conversations pretty early on. I mean, in the first few months, like, we were talking about things like children. We were talking about things like, if we were long distance. So it's like, if we ever live together, where are we going to live? Are we going to live in Florida? Are we going to live in New Jersey? And we were having some of these pretty big conversations early on. And a lot of times people are afraid to have these big conversations early on. And I always say, like, look, if this person is legit and they're not just using you for, a good time, like, they're going to be open to these conversations. And when somebody starts getting upset because you're bringing up these, quote, heavy conversations, it's because all they want to do is have a good time, and you're ruining their good time by getting too serious about it. So we don't have to really be afraid to talk about these things. But, we talked about things like, my wife asked me, for example, like, I want to know if you want children. And my honest answer at the time was, I don't really know. I could be fine with or without. And so we talked about that, and it wasn't necessarily one conversation, but it was something we talked about for a period of time. And ultimately, the agreement, I should say, that we came to was that I understand that that's a non-negotiable for her. And if our relationship gets to that place, that I will be an absolute yes to it. Right. So that was kind of the agreement we made there. And so what I'm getting at here is there was a lot of clarifying, like, our vision for the future. Another thing we talked about was, like, at the time I was traveling a lot for work. I was doing these seminars all over the country. And, she was expressing concerns that, if we did have kids one day, like, she didn't want to be home alone with the kids while I was working, 3 weeks out of the month away from home. And so that was another thing we talked about, like, do you see us being able to have, like, a life at home, right? So what we were doing was we were kind of creating a vision for the life that we would have together. And we were getting on the same page about that. Now, even you said you and your wife have been together, did you say 30 some odd years?
Yes.
Yeah. So my wife and I have been together 7 years. So we're not even close to where you are. But even in this amount of time, a lot has changed for us, right? But I think what we started doing in the beginning, and what we have done throughout, is that we started co-creating this vision, and we started working together to make this vision a reality. And that's something I think a lot of couples don't do. They just try to hang on and hope for the best. And that almost always leads to failure, right? So we co-created this vision, and we became invested in co-creating this vision. What we've also done along the way is continued to create the vision, and continued to be invested in co-creating the vision together. So this has required both of us to be honest about things that we're uncomfortable to be honest about. It's required both of us to ask for our needs in the relationship, and trust that the other person would be willing to meet those needs. It's required, just an incredible amount of, like, trust and vulnerability and honesty, and Not all of these conversations have been easy. Like at times the conversation of should we even still stay together has been brought up. So, like these have been challenging things to go through. But on the other side of each of these things, like what becomes stronger is like our trust in each other, our commitment to the life that we're building together, our feeling of being like understood by our partner, being appreciated by our partner, being respected, like the awareness that like my partner actually wants me to be happy. They actually want the things for me that I want for myself. Right. So like all of this has come as a result of the work that we've done in our relationship over the years. And so when it comes to finding an ideal partner, I think probably one of the best things you could look for is, yes, someone who shares your values. If you want kids, like they want kids too, or they're at least willing to get on board with it. If you have a certain idea about your life that you want to have, like, you need to talk about that with that person and see how they're willing to, if they're able to get on board with that or not. But then I think also, and probably even bigger than just someone who wants all the same things you want, is someone that you can have these conversations with. And someone that my wife said to me in the early days of our dating, and she said, one of the reasons that I know our relationship can work is because of the way we work through things together. And, I think to your point, Jeff, is like so many things are going to change in your life. Your bodies are going to change, your health is going to change, your circumstances are going to change, your financial situation is going to change. Like, like every aspect of your life is going to change over the years. But if you have the kind of relationship in which you can deal with difficult things together and you can work through them and you can be committed to your own and each other's happiness in the process, that's something that won't change no matter what you go through in life. So I think, that would probably be one of the biggest things to look for in a partner.
Beautifully said. I remember my mama God rest her soul, but my mom used to tell me this ancient phrase. She said, Jeff, don't let the sun go down on your wrath.
Mm-hmm.
She would tell me that all the time. She said, before the sun sets, if you and Jody are at odds, settle it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know, friends, if you're listening or not, but if you've ever tried that on a consistent basis for 30 years of your life, I can attest to it that it is hard. That's where that WORK word comes in at, right, Shane? I came home, I'm exhausted, you didn't pay me enough attention, now I'm pissed. Now the kids come home and they add to it, the animals come in and they add to it, and all of a sudden I'm looking at myself going, why, pardon me, but why in the hell am I here? It is at those moments where I go, okay, I've got a choice here. And I don't know about you, my friend, but one of the things that I've learned is that I give my human side a choice to leave. He'll take it every time.
Mm-hmm.
But if I also give my human side a challenge to stay and to work through it, then he kind of raises up a little bit. He kind of arises to the challenge, right? To be able to work through. But it is a constant and never-ending work. I love what you said about the values. Anybody else in the house listening tonight understand about values, what Shane's teaching us, sitting with our partner, talking about the things that mean the most to us? And I think what you said too, Shane, makes me think about feeling like my partner is truly listening to me and fully respecting and honoring my wishes. They might not agree, but they're at least honoring me. And I think that's vital to a long-lasting relationship. Boy, I appreciate you being on the conversation with us, Shane, so much. I did see a hand in the air. Are you okay if we kind of pause for a half a second, Shane? And maybe if our guests tonight have some questions they'd like to put out?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Anita, I know I had saw your hand. I don't know if that was by an accident, but I did want to honor you and your space. Did you have a question or a comment for Shane tonight?
No, not just I put it in the chat about just the language about saying ideal relationships and stuff, because nothing's perfect. And that kind of like, like I was with my husband for 23 and a half years. I'm a widow, 3 years this October. But anyway, that we had a perfectly imperfect marriage, like, and it really is. So, we were ideal for each other for all those years, type of thing. And we were both a work in progress constantly. I mean, I agree with lots of things you say about, his health changed, I changed, we changed back, and all this stuff like that. But we were together as a partner with that.
Yeah.
And continually with the communication, as you say, which is empowering. And it's very much, it's not always one conversation. It's kind of revisiting these conversations, which are hard conversations. There's no doubt about it. Not to scare anyone off, but it's not for, it's a hard look at oneself in the mirror too. It can be. Yeah. And I've also find that having a huge sense of humor about oneself or their self or whatever. I mean, whatever works for people, right? And stuff like that. So anyway, I'm enjoying this. Thank you.
I love it. Perfectly imperfect. What do you think, Coach? Huh, Shane? That's perfectly imperfect. That's a great
how it is.
Yeah.
Your perfect person. It's funny. Like, your perfect person is going to be perfect for you in the sense that they're going to give you incredible opportunities for growth. But that does not mean that everything's going to be perfect.
Yeah, indeed. I wrote, Anita said, and when she was talking, I wrote, relationships are not for the faint of heart. Lasting relationships are not for the faint of heart. I've always struggled with this. I've spent a good portion of my career, Shane, in hospice and palliative care. So I've gotten the privilege of sitting beside the bedsides of people who are leaving the planet. And I'll never forget, I've had multiple conversations with both all genders about relationships and marriage. And I remember talking to this one gentleman. He had been married for 70 years. And of course, I was fascinated and asked him what was his secret. And he just looked at me and he said, well, I stayed. and I kind of thought, you stayed? So I had to follow up. I don't know about the rest of you. Are you thinking what I was thinking? Well, why did you stay? Were you happy? And I asked him that. And here's something he told me that really made me think, Shane. He said, I didn't give myself a choice not to stay. Mm-hmm. But he also went on to elaborate that the generational ideology that he came from was a major influence, and what caused him to make those decisions to stay through this perfectly imperfect relationship, always working on himself, and then sometimes concurring that that's her space, this is my space, but we're going to share, coexist for the rest of our lives. Now, good, bad, neither, that's not the point, but it was really an eye-opener for me, Shane, to contemplate making a choice to stay, or contemplating thank you, but no thank you, it's time for me to move on. That's a different topic of conversation. But I've always wondered whether relationships are forever or are they for now. Just my own thinking. So brilliant conversation. Friends, another question, a comment, a thought for Shane? Anybody else in the house? Go ahead and touch the hand button on the app. Let us know you're here, and we'd love to hear from you. Becca, it's good to have you in the house tonight. Thank you so much. I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of backtrack just a bit. You had touched on something that I thought was pretty on point. For me, I don't consider love to be an emotion. I consider love to be a choice. Eventually, you're right, friendships, relationships, all of those things, they start to drift apart. There's distance between you guys. Life gets in the way, kids, whatever, things change. And at that point, it's a choice. It's a choice that you make to stay in love with somebody. My parents come from that old school generation where they met when they were 16 and they got married and they had their kids and they stayed together until my dad passed away, and so there was no stepbrothers or stepsisters. It's just my dad and mom did a really good job of keeping us together. And that was almost a blessing and a curse, right? Because I know what that kind of love looks like and feels like. And I try to create that. I think I've tried to create that in all the wrong places. But I do think that it is definitely a choice. I've asked my mother herself, you know, how did you make it so far in your marriage? And she said, you have to get up and you have to choose. You have to choose every day, whether or not that's, you know, you're going to choose to fight for your marriage, or you're going to choose to walk away and start over. Both of those choices are hard, but only one of them, you know, only one of them made sense for her and my dad, which was to stick it out.
Yeah.
So
I thank you, Becca, for sharing. Yeah. Perspectives, right? It's, you know, and I don't know about you, friends, and Shane, maybe you can, you know, I don't know if you speak to this or not, but I think as humans, we're so judgmental, right? Everything has to be a right or a wrong. If I do this, then that means this group's going to look at me and make me feel guilty. If I do that, this group's going to look at me and make me feel good. So really, when it comes down to it, it's the one looking at us in the mirror, right? I got to be happy with that one. I got to love that one through these choices. I've met beautiful people that had long-standing relationships, and they got to the point where they just looked at one another and said, thank you, but no thank you. I mean, and yet, you know, what's so beautiful about that, Shane, is they remain friends forever. You know, they all have found different relationships, et cetera, but humans can still be humans. We don't have to be, you know, in one respect, so black and white, right or wrong. You know what I'm saying? That's a tough one, because we all seem to want to judge our actions, and we're our own worst critics, aren't we, Shane? We're our own worst critics. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and, you know, kind of on that note, I think an important awareness about relationships, and for anyone who's looking for, you know, the one or their life partner, I think it's an important kind of precursor awareness to recognize that not all relationships are meant to be that. And so, you know, like, I mean, I had so many relationships before I met my wife, and every single one of them were incredibly valuable learning opportunities that I think prepared me for marriage. And, you know, I would say every single one of those relationships got to a point where they had kind of naturally run their course. And sometimes it's because, you know, the person was leading me on and had no real interest of ever taking it somewhere. And the lesson in that was for me to recognize, okay, this is going nowhere. I need to stop hanging on. Right. And sometimes the lesson was the opposite. Sometimes it was like, there's no room for me to grow in this relationship. Right. Like I have grown as far as I can in this relationship, and it's time for me to let it go. And I think both of those were like incredibly profound learning opportunities. And, you know, part of like having a heart that's open and like ready to invite the one in, like that same energy is also willing to let someone who's not the one go. And I think one of the biggest blockages we have is that when we find someone, we cling to them and don't want to let them go. And I say to all my clients, everybody, like, you're probably going to have to let quite a few people go before you find the one that you're meant to keep, you know? And sometimes you'll even have to let that one go. I mean, Anita was just sharing about how her husband passed. And like, I think that's a reality of life too. Like we never go into a relationship expecting that. And yet I've met so many people who have had the love of their life pass and early enough that they still had a lot of life to live. And so I think, you know, the same energy that can invite that relationship in is also the energy that could let it go if it was the right thing to do. And I think it takes, like, you have to be very mature and very secure to be able to stand in that place. But I think it's important to be able to do that.
Yeah, that is so well said. Which brings us back to your original comments about personal development. I don't know if you caught that, friends, but what I caught, just hypothetically, just play along with me for a second. What if life was never about making a permanent decision, creating a permanent identity, having a permanent thing, saying, oh my God, I finally arrived. But what if life was nothing more than but living experiences that helped us grow, right, Shane? So it's really bizarre. I remember meeting a man who had talked to me about his journey in relationships, and his journey had led him through 5 different relationships, Shane. And at one point, I remember we were kind of collectively together at a happy hour or whatever, and he struck up this conversation, and I was listening intently. And when he said he had been through 5 relationships, a couple of people in my party right away went, oh, well, what's wrong? And, he's a playboy and all of that. But then when you got to the point, he said, Jeff, every relationship showed me something about myself, that each one helped me grow. And the 5th relationship he was in was his ideal relationship. So it makes me think, I wonder if life is just one big lesson, and what I'm experiencing now can simply say, I could look at it as going, it's preparing me, because my best is still yet to come. And this could be preparing me for that best. Right, Shane? You think? Yeah.
I agree 100%. And truth is, none of us are getting out of here alive. Right. So
say that again. Amen to that.
It's all temporary. Like everything you have in this life is temporary. And I have to assume that it's all a lesson for some greater purpose. And that's something I just have to believe for myself. I can't say that, with any certainty other than what I know in my heart. But yeah, like all of these experiences are this is our school. This is our curriculum. And we're learning from all of it,
Yeah. Hence our relationships. Every relationship is a school, right? Every lesson. I've always coached my clients and said, this is not happening to you. This is happening for you. Mm-hmm. And that's really a big slap in the face sometimes, because the pain, whether that's an abusive relationship, a narcissistic relationship, or just simply, it doesn't have to be that. It could be a relationship that feels like it's ending and you don't know why. But looking at it from the perspective that this is happening for me and not to me can collectively help us heal and to move on. You and I talked prior, Shane, about this hour going by so fast, and hasn't it gone by so fast?
Very quickly, yeah.
It's like only a few minutes. Talk to us a little bit about your ideal client, the ideal person that you work with. Can you kind of give us a little bit of a profile? So if we ourselves or we know somebody that's looking they would be able to reach out to you for help?
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. And I do coach both men and women, but I would say I primarily work with women. My program, which I have a 12-week program, and the program is specifically for women. And I would say, the person who would be my ideal client is someone who is ready for long-term commitment, someone who, deeply wants that, deeply craves that. And they feel lost. They feel hopeless. They feel that, no matter what they do, they hit a wall. I think to put it in a nutshell, that would really be it. Like if you are looking for love, if you've been looking for love for a long time and you feel stuck, you feel like you can't get anywhere with it, like that's the person I want to talk to, because I know exactly what to do to get you unstuck and get you on track.
Yeah. Now that's primarily the single population. Yes, that's where your forte is. You feel strongly called to those singles. So these are ones that are navigating their way through life. Maybe they've done the dating scene a little bit. Maybe they've had a couple of relationships, but they haven't really panned out. And they're kind of looking at, what do I need to do next to kind of really dial into maybe this ideal partner of mine? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Super cool. Friends, I appreciate each and every one of you dropping on our call today. Some of you have been here since the beginning. Some of you have joined us later, but regardless, we are so glad that you are here. Listen, I've put some information in our chat about how to connect with Shane. If you or someone you know is looking for some help in the relationship department, I can tell by our conversation today that Shane could be a huge help. And him and his relationship now could be a valuable asset to you and yours. If I can let the cat out of the bag too, Shane, letting everybody know you're going to be joining us on Circles.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So friends, here's what I want you to do. You have the chance to follow Shane right here on Circles. So if you hold his avatar down, you're going to have a chance to follow him. And we're going to be talking about bringing him back on in the next few weeks to start a series of classes that he's going to be sharing some, not all, but some of the content that he walks his clients through. And that's going to be a huge value for you and those of you that know that are looking for help in the relationship department. So make sure you check this out. Make sure you follow Shane. You'll be able to get a notification when he comes on the app to share more. Shane, 30 seconds, last minute is all yours. Some encouraging words to our audience that you'd like to share? I lost you. You're on mute, Shane, or did I lose you?
Oh, sorry, I got muted. Sorry about that.
There you go. Yeah, just wanted to give you the last 30 seconds or so and share what's on your heart. Any encouraging words?
Yeah, definitely. I think what I'd like to share is that, what you're looking for is looking for you. And there is I'd say a journey that you need to take to get there. And I do believe that anything is possible. Whatever you're dreaming about, it's not an accident that you're dreaming about that. That is your higher self inspiring you towards the life you're meant to have. And if you choose to take that journey, it's not going to be easy. It would be way easier to not take that journey and just sit and watch Netflix and drink wine or whatever people do. It would be way easier not to take that journey, but taking that journey will lead you to everything you're seeking, and it will be the most rewarding thing you've ever done in your life. So that would be my inspiring message. And I believe that's true for all of us and available to all of us. So yeah. I would encourage people to commit to that for themselves and seek out their highest joy in life.
Yeah. Beautifully said. What's easy to do is also easy not to do. So we accept the challenge, Shane. Friends, thank you so much. Our time is up. I'm Jeff Krum. I've been your host here on Circles. You're going to have a chance to follow me too. If you don't already, whenever I have another masterclass, you'll get a notification. Shane, we want to thank you very much. We're excited to be partnering with you here on Circles. So we'll look forward to more content and more tips and tricks on how we can do our best self in these relationship fields. So thank you for being on with us, my friend. I appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. Thank you to everybody who joined today. Lots of love to all of you, and I'm excited to be on here.
Super cool. All the love back to you. It's coming up in the air. Friends, as we close, you're going to have a chance to rate the room today. Share your thoughts about Shane. Please do so. I'm Jeff. I've been your host. Shane has been our guest. We'll see you next time right here on the Circles app. Good night, everybody.
Good night.